Well, let's go ahead and get into our next semifinal. And to take us through that, we've got Panda and Freak joining us back on the broadcast. Panda, you are one of the people I wanted to talk to about this. Alan and Szychu maybe in the grand finals?
And I'm very fortunate for many reasons. I got to cast Szychu yesterday against Majin Bay, today in the quarterfinals, and now again in the semis. I think he has the most interesting lineup just to start just brainstorming, what are you going to ban? How do the matchups work? Because like I was talking to Freak, in the break, there's no matchup tables for Zoe Heim or Field of Rush in this meta because it's decks that people are not playing on ladder or in tournaments.
Yeah, well, I don't want to keep you both from this semifinal match any longer, so I'm going to get out of here, and Freak, why don't you take over?
Sure, yeah, this is going to be really fun. Obviously, we're going to figure out who is joining Alan ZQ in the finals. Yamato from Japan. He's got his own spice, bringing darkness. It's undefeated. It is 3-0, I believe, to my recollection, as I look at my notes. That's been doing pretty well. Meanwhile, Szychu has had his own decent set of decks, as I'm going to pull it up so I can double-check all the information. But they both had, obviously really, really good records. Yeah, Yamato's darkness, 3-0-1. Szychu's 3-0 in his Kate as Draven, and he's 3-1 on Field of Rush. So they've both had some really, really strong winning decks for themselves.
And look at the lineups and the bans. You have to start thinking about what has already happened in this tournament. With Majin Bay, he had Draven Scion in his lineup. He banned Zoe Heimer because that was an insta-lose if they were to queue those decks into each other. And Draven Scion is also in the lineup for Yamato. Is this going to be a ban on Zoe Heimer once again? If it is, how do his decks match up into Field of Rush? I think not so well. So it's the case of you're looking at what deck to ban, and you want to ban all of them because it is kind of a tough matchup for Darkness, I think, in many cases. Draven Scion in the case of Zoe Heimer as well. Overall, it's a difficult spread. And Plunder, maybe not from stats, but just from my perception, has not been performing all that well in this tournament.
Yeah, overall, it's not done too well, at least for Yamato. It's gone 50-50 for him. He is 2-2 on it individually, so that's something for him. But yeah, from what I have seen, it doesn't seem to line up. Oftentimes, like, okay, I found the Gangplank, but they already had a Thermo Beam ready, or if they were really lucky, a stacked up Tri-Beam ready to go. It just feels like we're not getting that, Gangplank comes down, swings with the barrel with the explosion, or Sejuani comes down with the freeze. Like, I haven't even seen that one maybe more than once of getting the vulnerable Frostbite attack. So that's been pretty rough. Meanwhile, obviously, Heimerdinger actually hasn't been winning for Szychu. He's gotten a couple of bans, but it's only 1 and 2 in the games where it's been left up. So when a player feels like their decks are going to do well against Heimer Zoe, they've generally been right about this one. This is the deck we're going to be looking at a lot of. 2 of Hush is going to have like some use against Scion. In certain like rounds, it'll be okay against Darkness if you can catch like Heimer in time, or sorry, like Vhagar in time so they can't go face. Like sometimes it'll work out. This is the Sunburst version as well. We saw that one get played a little while ago. So Sunburst, at least itself, can line up against Darkness, for example. I think you actually have several decent targets there. So am curious what these matchups going to look like.
I think the big thing with this deck as well, though, is that when it isn't banned and it goes through, it's for a reason in most times. So it might have a lower win rate because it's being let through because, the rest of the matchups or the decks that you have in your lineup face up pretty well against a deck that has, I think, very polarized matchup tables. It's not a deck you play on ladder for a reason. It's not, a versatile mid-range deck like Plunder or like TF Swain or Ezreal Draven in some cases. It's a deck that has these very good counters against a specific deck like Draven Scion, for example, but folds to any kind of aggro and folds to just a lot of different strategies.
Yeah, and looking at the matchups we could look at, it was basically X Draven, which is what she was running. I think it's 2 Caitlyn's, 1 Ezreal, but you kind of just roll those all in together. They're all kind of the same deck. All the matchups look bad. Like, they're all unfavored. Against Darkness, it's 55-45 roughly. Against Plunder, it's a bit closer. And against Scion Draven, it's 3-1. It's, like, really bad there. So, you assume that deck's being left up. And you're probably looking at a Scion Draven ban from Szychu, is my guess. Unless he, like, really understands, oh, actually, both Heimer and FT are going to feel really bad against Plunder or something. Like, if you have a different read, but from ladder data, it's like, well, Scion Draven probably is looking the most skewed for you.
And this is the case where the mining need, I think, come into play. You have to start thinking about what your opponent's going to ban, and then think about your ban. Because if you have a good matchup with Zoe Heimer into Draven Scion, you don't want to ban Draven Scion. But if you know your opponent's going to ban Zoe Heimer, then you do want to ban Draven Scion possibly. So this is the part where it gets extremely complicated for these players. With so much at stake, they have to go through all the permutations of what this, the ban could look like for each player, the queuing order for certain decks, the dodges for certain matchups. So it gets very complicated for the players. for us, equally so, I think.
We
Especially with
get
decks
to sit and watch.
we get to sit and watch and just enjoy these players trying to find out the solution to a very big problem, which is, this could be banning the right deck or banning the wrong deck could be a key part of winning this series and advancing to the finals to play against Alan.
Yeah, and it's fun because this is it's actually an area of study that I actually focused on in school. It's part of game theory. This specifically would be it would turn into a Nash equilibrium where basically you end up building a probability for like, okay, I'm gonna like 3-1 ban Scion versus Plunder. I'm just gonna make up the words and the numbers here. And if your opponent also believes you're going to pick with some level of randomness, like that's what it comes down to. Because as soon as you become predictable, they're like, well, as you know what he's going to ban, so you have to not only believe, but also make other people believe that you're going to ban with some level of randomness, even if it's like 3-1 or 4-3 or whatever. That actually like boils down to just like, well, we're both going to flip our sets of coins and roll our sets of dice and pick our RNG and we picked bans. And this is actually, as dumb as that sounds, the optimal way to do bans if you both have perfect information.
That being said, it's not completely random because you can look at what bans have happened in this tournament already. You can look at, even qualifier data to some extent. Even if a certain player plays a certain way with Alan and Szychu that stream constantly, you can pick up on certain play patterns in terms of what they expect or what they've said publicly. There's so much information and so much mind games at play here, I think. But we will find out, I think, very soon what the bans will be. Like I mentioned, if it's a certain ban, you don't want to, you want to ban a certain deck and then the opposite. So it does get quite complicated. I think Darkness might have, the profile here, a hard time if it doesn't find, its catalyzers. I think Patriot was saying kind of sarcastic, kind of jokingly, but he has been finding kind of the perfect hands almost in the last few series that I've been watching, at least with his Darkness deck. When this Darkness deck isn't able to ramp up with Rope Makers and with the Catalyzer early on, it has a lot of trouble really becoming a threat in the late game. It kind of doesn't have that oomph that most big control decks do have to finish games confidently. And looking at kind of a lineup from Szychu that has a lot of removal spells and kind of answers in kind of a more control-y style, things like Catalyzer sticking on the board, even if they are drawn, might be difficult and might be hard to ramp that Darkness in that case.
For sure, it really depends on what kind of removal you're looking at. I mean, the last time that I just cast Darkness, we were up against, I want to say it was Zoe Nami, and it's like, well, I have no ways of targeting and removing this, and it's interesting because I play the rounds back in my head and say, okay, we got double Catalyzer down, we got Darkness to like 5 even before Vhagar even got played, and then he went for a really aggressive line where he went for a like round 7 Ishtali Sentinel into, double blowing up, and it's like, okay, if there's no spell shield, we get in. But, if you got to invoke a spell shield, suddenly you don't have any more Darkness generation and took a risky line. So Feel the Rush is going to be the ban on one side. Scion Draven, somewhat expected, going to be the ban on the other.
And I think if you're going through that, I think the easiest mind game, this makes sense. I think this is the Draven. The Draven Ezreal deck is a very bad matchup against Draven Scion. You know that the Zoe Heimer is not going to get banned because you think the Draven Scion's going to get banned. So I think in the end, if you go through kind of one loop, and the most simple loop of the mind games, this does make sense to me. I think Plunder can can pop off, like we mentioned, and just hit on curve and be able to really just swing games with Gangplank Sejuani, but the curve will matter a lot, as it will with Darkness. I think the draws for Yamato, I don't want to say it's all variance, it's all RNG, it's all, luck, but for both of these decks, I think finding the right curve and finding the right cards in the early to mid game is especially important.
Absolutely, and just to once again sort of crystallize what I'm expecting, and is that, again, Kata's Draven does not appear to be favored in either matchup. So Szychu's going to have a little bit of difficulty winning on either side. And then beyond that, his Heimerdinger is 1 and 2. Like, when it's been left up, it's been left up for a reason, and the players have been right about that. So on paper, looking in before the play is actually happening, I'm slightly favored towards Yamato based on the decks I'm seeing and the cards in hand, but obviously we have to wait to see what's going on. Early House Spider means a little bit of pressure, but a Catalyzer can answer and get 1 buff.
And that's the thing, you're not going to attack here for Szychu. You do have the Sun Fumes in hand. You don't have Mystic Shots in this list, so this is already a straight up, detriment going into this matchup because that's the cleanest kind of 2 damage ping. But in this case, Sun Fumes was kept in hand from Szychu, preparing for this exact moment when this Catalyzer swings in. You're going to get the Sun Fumes in and deny the strike effect. This is so important. Once this Darkness starts ramping up, you're in trouble. If it ramps up once, it's already a big deal because it kills off so many of your 3 health units. If it doesn't ramp at all, then you're kind of controlling how big and how effective this Darkness game plan can be.
Meanwhile, one prank available for Yamato, so we'll see when that comes down. You don't want to hit Lasso if you can help it, because he'll just discard it when he gets the chance. All right. You almost always click Sentry. That's pretty much a non-choice. But right now, we know there's no discards for Szychu just yet, so that Lost Soul is just a spotted 8-drop and another 8-drop drawn. These are not, this is not a pretty start.
The Farron comes into hand, and we've seen versions of Darkness, especially recently in the past week. I've seen in the Americas ladder with players like Deech, a Brazilian player, playing versions that have, things like Vengeance, things like Renation, just bigger answers. In this case, for Yamato's version, he has the mini-morphs for something like a Farron, but he doesn't have something like a Vengeance, for example. Doesn't have the more standard removal, I think, in Shadow Isle. So the enormous units like Farron can be an enormous threat in a matchup like this one, where you don't really have, even Rekindler, it's a 7-drop, but it's a 4/4 stat line. You need to have a big spell to answer Farron when it comes down.
And right now, not going to have any 8 damage darknesses to be that answer. Obviously, we're well past the curve of that happening. I mean, if Veigar sticks and you get another catalyzer and it somehow hits twice, you'd get there on time. I'm not saying that's realistic, but we've got our first darkness here. We can generate a new one with the Dark Bulb Acolyte, so I don't know if you want to throw it at a spider, but we know there's not that much else in hand.
And you have the Arachnoid Sentry, but you don't have the Flock, and that is such an enormous thing for Yamato here, for the Veigar to survive. We talked about the darkness ramping up. Even just one time is already just so big for the possible win rate of this deck in a matchup like this one. So very good news for Yamato and very bad news for Szychu. Has one part of the combo, but not the Flock to capitalize.
I want to investigate one line of play, though, which is getting Tri-Beam big enough. We had some Fumes come through for 3, come through for 3 mana. We have an Ezreal, we have a Spider. So we can get Tri-Beam to 4. And that could be enough to kill Veigar. Now, the problem is, of course, if you can ever buff this damage, because if you play Ezreal, right, the round ticks over, Darkness deals 3, Ezreal dies. That doesn't feel good. You don't really want that to happen. But if you were I must kill this Veigar, that is at least a line of play you could go for.
And we mentioned it. That would work. That would, kill his Veigar unless the stress defense is played defensively to get it to 6. But the problem is that one Take of Darkness already happened, and that's already, you've lost that battle, basically.
Yep. So, going wide instead, going for damage to face to say, look, maybe we can end this game. Keep in mind, knows Farron is in hand, knows that you can play 2 Decimates on round 9. Farron can swing on the round you play him on 8. If you're down to about 12, you probably just win the round after Farron gets dropped. So that can be the line of play here, and just looking to get the Nexus low enough that you win before you can heal. You hope there's no Ishtali Sentinel, and you're golden if that happens.
Both Stress Defense and Event Horizon are actually pretty interesting, counters to Farron, though, that I didn't really consider in terms of you have direct removal with Minimorph. Sure, you're leaving behind a body, so it's not as efficient as something like a Vengeance, for example. But I hadn't considered the more abstract removal with both Stress Defense and Event Horizon, not removing the unit altogether, but stalling enough to a point where maybe something like a Stali Sentinel or just a Darkness take over and win you the game.
Yeah, it's not going to catch a Caitlyn or a Draven, but it's going to catch all the spiders, and it's going to catch Farron. I mean, maybe you like Axatutu, but yeah, that's gonna really lower the damage output there. So the longer Veigar lives, the happier he is. We've ticked over from 4, so Darkness should be at 3 damage. But obviously a long way to go till he can level. Problem is, again, this is still a very, very wide board. He could Darkness the Draven. That feels reasonable here, and you can still play your Acolyte afterwards and generate a new one. That seems like an okay line of play, but obviously Withering Wail also removes 3 different things, and you could maybe even hold on to Vile Feast as well. That Spider can jump block the Draven, and indeed, yeah, that's going to be the line of play is let's just put down some units and use our fast spells to slow down.
Exactly, and the whale coming in, it looks like a big open attack from Szychu. It looks like a lot of damage going through, but the whale will completely shut down most of this with, now 3 of the spiders at 1 HP, 1 of the spiderlings to block the 2/2, and the healing, of course, to go back up to 20 and stay very healthy for what might be a burn game plan from Szychu with Farron and Ezreal in the late game. Differentiating from the Draven Caitlyn decks that are trying to just fully control the board, you have more of a burn possibility, but against a deck that heals, it's not so great.
And difficulty here is Withering Wail is a one-of in Yamato's deck. You realistically can't just say, I expect this to be the case. You can't really expect that card to be there. Puts down the Challenger, forcing the Darkness out. You know that was available. But the big thing is, enough spell mana was banked, right? That Darkness was played with just spell mana. Withering Wail is completely playable here. And he's like, Withering Wail is probably happening? Yeah.
Yeah,
he's kind of playing around it.
As you're playing Runeterra, you get this kind of secondhand nature at knowing when the Withering Wail or the Avalanche is in hand for the opponent. You can read into the information of how their plays are being made in the previous turn, setting it up, and it was, I think, pretty clear for Szychu that it was going to come through. There's a trade on the spiders. Draven to survive, punches through some damage, but still 16 HP for Yamato, and Veigar has stuck on the board. This is the biggest problem. It's just too late. I mean, Rekindler's there anyway, this next turn, to get the Veigar back on the board. And the darkness has already ramped up so much, this catalyzer in hand isn't even necessary anymore. You don't even care about this catalyzer.
Oh my gosh, what are we up to, like 6 now, I think, roughly? Because we ticked over on 4 to 5 and 5 to 6.
I believe.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, either way, I mean, obviously looking pretty good. Veigar is can be replayed, Rekindler can be played. You can think about how much mana you're trying to be efficient around, so going for the cheapening instead. And you can obviously create one with a bulb.
This might be looking into kind of making it awkward, because this would be the perfect turn for Szychu, I think, to get a really big Tri-Beam if it has been stacking in hand, to get a kill on a unit and then open attack next turn and push through damage. I think Yamato knows this and is trying to make this not really the best target for Tri-Beam to come down, and the biggest tempo turns for Tri-Beam to really make an impact and swing the tempo in favor of the Draven Caitlyn or Draven Ezreal player is around this time, around turn 6 and 7.
Yeah, this is the line that gives you another piece of removal, basically. Now you got 2 mana darkness, you generate 1, you're ready to go, you can drop off Caitlyn or Draven, whichever you prefer. Draven being 1 from leveling is an okay option. Obviously, Caitlyn herself also just is the healthier of the two, because Pokestick will knock down Draven, so there's logic to either.
And there's just the Twin Blade Revenant being cycled, the Axion on the Caitlyn, not very relevant. It's just trying to get the full value from, well, the infinite value that is this Lost Soul Twin Blade Revenant combo. Darkness comes down now. Yeah. It is at 4, and there is nothing currently on the board ticking this higher up. The Veigar obviously was removed last turn and hasn't been replayed yet, either through hand or through the Rekindler.
But the nice thing is, we should be 1 darkness away from Veigar leveling up, right? So you play the Rekindler or the Veigar generates a new one, that's going to be a level, and here we go.
The stress defense was just decked.
Oh.
You don't have the Veigar on the board, so you can't obviously use the Event Horizon, because that is a champion spell. It's not main decked, but the stress defense comes in right on time to just make this 8 attack go down to 1 and become almost irrelevant, at least for 1 turn.
Yeah, but the problem is, of course, Veigar can't level in time. There's no way to get Darkness played in time, so that's going to drop to the 4-3 challenge, so delays the Veigar, going to hold on to the... I like this line of play because you can still Pokestick the Draven and you can still stress defense the Farron, so I think this is the exact right way to go about it.
And you can put the Catalyzer to still get the strike, because as Szychu, you thought, okay, if I attack like this, then that means that the Catalyzer can't do really anything relevant. But now, with the Trust Defense, you can put the Catalyzer to still get a strike effect, not die, and continue ramping up the Darkness. Perfect play from Yamato here.
This is really, really smart. Now we can look at the fact that there's no... Okay, you probably still have the Tri-Beam, you can probably still remove the Veigar. He's not coming down leveled yet until you can generate another Darkness. Yeah, it's dealing, I think, 5 now with that hit, and it'll do 6 if Veigar ever lives through a level, or through a turn. But this should probably get Tri-Beamed, I'm guessing, and then if you can make Darkness go away, because again, it is at 5, so it will kill Farron.
And you can still play the Ezreal out here. First, although we'll just be dying to the Darkness, maybe not the best choice until that Darkness is played out. Although I think it won't... Yeah, it's going to be a difficult one here to decide, for Yamato to decide what to hit with this Darkness to try and control what could be, an attempt at just a big swing next turn from Szychu with double Decimate in hand. If he connects any amount of damage, either through the Ezreal, burst spell or the burst speed interaction onto the Nexus, or just through Farron connecting with Overwhelm, he has to push some damage for the Decimates to come online.
This bumps it up even more, so there's the 5 damage Darkness, the kind of expectation here on this one. Ezreal, we know, can come down and stay alive.
But you also have to deal with this Veigar.
Of course.
You have 6 mana to work with. You can't play both the Tri-Beam and the Ezreal. It has to be the Tri-Beam first. Let's see what Szychu hits. I think the Tri-Beam is at least going to be at 6 or 7 here, so it is going to be an impactful unit. But how impactful can it really be? With Stress Defense still in the hand for Yamato.
And Vulnerable 2-2 is actually just the right size to handle the 4-2 Dark Bulb anyway. What are we getting? If it's at 5, you get Stress Defense. I'm just not sure how much it's at. I don't know if you'd want to. You're like, well, if you have Flock, it's not any better for me. We know Captain Farron is only a 1-of, so there's nothing like huge otherwise you really care about. There's not much else you're doing with stress defense. That Trident is at 5. That's why he's thinking. That's why he's thinking. We know it would live, at least for the round.
I figured it was surely at 6 or 7, but it seems like Szychu, and this is something you have to consider. I think Szychu considered that he saw stress defense played last turn, and he thought, you know, it's not likely to have the second one in hand.
It's a 2-of, and he got both.
The Minute Henchman, a card you don't tend to see in any kind of play, competitive or casual, but it finds a place in Worlds.
That card.
Skarsgård was mentioning, you know, all these cards are going to find a place. He was right. He is a, you know, slippery wave rider. We saw the snap finds as well, and Minute Henchman finds a place in a World semifinal.
Nexus Strike cloned me, and it's named after one of my favorite people who was a producer on Legends of Runeterra. So, you know, it's a Rioter reference. I'm a fan. Here we go. What are we discarding? One of the Rekindlers, and that is Charlie Sentinel. Is so nice.
This is the great thing about casting with you, Freak. We get some insider knowledge that I would not get otherwise in any other case. All
right, what are we nuking? A 5/4, sure.
This is definitely the first.
That's why no one plays that card.
This is the first time in the history of Runeterra that a Minute Henchman has been targeted by a darkness. I can guarantee that. There is no chance I will put any amount of money on the line that this has ever happened.
Expedition exists. That card shows up a lot in Expedition.
In organized and you know,
in constructed.
Intentional play, let's say.
Valid. I will give you that one. Okay.
This Catalyzer is still on the board trying to ram up the darknesses. Rekindler comes down, another Veigar comes down. You have 6 mana to work with, but this Tri-Beam is not big enough. That is for sure to kill off. Yeah, it's really not there yet. The Aloof obviously is a 4-mana card, not 3 mana, so it hasn't pumped up. The Tri-Beam, you can play Ezreal to pump it up once, but then you don't have mana for Tri-Beam or really any other kind of power plays. You don't have any discards for the Lost Souls, so everything is going wrong for Szychu. And we talked about, you know, some amount of luck or variance or things going well for Yamato. Yeah. It continues to happen. The both Trice defenses on attack and on defense being completely fantastic top decks.
So if Darkness is at 7, okay, so next round Darkness is at 7, which means you can Darkness face, Ishali Sentinel, Darkness face. I believe, right? Because like it'll clone a face Darkness, am I right?
If it has a target to hit, it'll clone it to face, yes.
Well, and with Veigar too, yeah, so...
There is the Ezreal uncontested. The mana has been spent now from Yamato. You have the Mystic Shot here to kill off a Catalyzer, to damage the Veigar possibly in you know, hopes, of drawing into, I guess, maybe just the Tri-Beam to kill off the Veigar.
Tri-Beam should go to 3 off this, so, if you go, you know, open round Darkness, Tri-Beam kills Veigar, and then Ishtali's only going to hit, you know, a unit in face and not face in face. Second Ishtali Sentinel!
You have the Sump Fumes as well. It can obviously kill, as long as you get a card into hand, which I think there actually isn't a way to do it with the current hand for Szychu. So just all these pieces in the hand for Szychu not working well together. You normally have all these kind of synergy combos in the deck, but not really the case here for Szychu. He has the burn with the Ezreal on the board, but I think we both know this Ezreal won't be surviving very long.
Yeah, so there's Darkness 7. Okay, killing Ezreal, and says, I'm the control. I know what your hand is. I know it's Lost Soul, Decimate, and then just 3 other cards. And if I'm the control and I keep generating.
Very little fast speed interaction here to get some value from Ezreal before he dies. It's only going to be the Sun Fumes and killing off a unit that really isn't, I mean, it's obviously a high attack total here, but not really the pivotal unit to kill here. You only have 2 damage on Sun Fumes. You haven't added another card into hand. Now, like you mentioned, the Tri-Beam for 3 damage, going down into the Veigar. No more stress defenses or defenses of any kind to help Veigar survive here.
The elements bind the living and the dead.
The Ixtali Sentinel comes down. The Darkness still at 2 mana, killing off the unit that was just generated and dealing damage to the Nexus as well, putting both players now down to 13.
I am in control.
This fight looks good. That's another 7 going through, and next round we know there's an Ishali Sentinel ready to play.
And look at this hand from Szychu. It's just not what you want to see. The top decks are terrible for Szychu. Even if a Farron, there's only one Farron in the deck. Not even a Farron can kind of try and cause some kind of threat here onto the Nexus for Yamato. The healing as well from Ixtali means that what was before 13 HP and maybe some you know, kind of in range of Get Excited and Decimate is now 17 HP. And this is going to be game 1 going to Yamato. I think full control of this late game.
And he knows. Yeah.
The Zillion emote, I think, it just confirmed what I just said. Szychu knows he is done.
My.
And game one goes to Yamato. He punches through this first game in the series. He's one game away from a finals showdown with Alan ZQ.
Darkness is 4-0 at the Legends of Runeterra World Championship. You love to see it. And now, go ahead.
I will admit, Freak, I think you remember the very first day that we spoke during rehearsals. I kind of threw some shade at Darkness. I kind of said, I don't know what Yamato's thinking. This deck is kind of not so great, and even more so, it looked kind of like a first iteration of Darkness that you would see on ladder. But Yamato, I don't know if it's the heart of the cards. I don't know if it's the brain of the cards. If he had he really thought through all the matchups and wanted to bring this deck, but it's been performing so well for him in this tournament. Finds a win in the semis against Szychu, and now Szychu is with his back against the wall, still on this same list, on the Draven Ezreal Caitlyn list, and Yamato on Plunder.
Alrighty. Well, data says it's 52% with some variance for Plunder. This is going to be a really, honestly, fair-looking matchup. It's going to be how the draws look. House Spiders are in for Szychu. Not an always pick. It is generally an anti-aggro tech in that kind of a list, but, you are going to have some early board presence on the other side, so can make some sense here, and going to get ourselves underway soon. Just a couple of quick passes.
We saw some big draws there. Gangplank and Sejuani in the hand for Yamato, and the Farron in the hand for Szychu for that late game. The biggest thing I think in this matchup might just be this Tri-Beam. If you get this Tri-Beam big enough to the point where Sejuani or Gangplank are played on curve, and the Tri-Beam can answer them, it is a huge tempo swing in terms of denying your opponent's game plan, stopping his biggest threat, and possibly developing one of your own.
Interesting, not willing to trade a 2-1 for a 1-1, hoping to find something better to fight later on. Can go for a Plunder trigger if you want to nab something. Doesn't have any targets for his Soothsayer, so yeah, kind of has to go for this play, otherwise he's full passing on this round.
And this always feels a little bit bad because you obviously want to try and just hit the Plunder curve while playing, let's say, a more normal game plan, not wasting one of the cards in hand, not losing kind of some hand advantage, and saving that warning shot where it's extra effective with Sejuani on the board and leveled up to just have a burst speed freeze, or even just, we've seen it quite a few times in this tournament, lethal damage with Dreadway on the hand. We saw a 6 damage warning shot, so sometimes these warning shots in the late game can become very relevant. In this case, having to be used early on just to try and keep those Plunder ticks on track.
Right now, no activators, no use for this Scorched Earth just yet, but 3 of Make It Rain in the deck, a Parlay in there as well, and eventually you can get Gangplank up to make it happen. But yeah, decent looking pass. You don't want to waste a sun on this. You're just kind of waiting until Captain Farron comes down. Great Parlay. That's going to be such a nice lineup. It feels outstanding we can get that value. So that's going to be the second bit of XP onto the double Overwhelm champions.
And the Thermo Beam draw was actually fantastic for Szychu as well in this matchup. It is one, kind of one-for-one way to deal with the big units like Gangplank or Sejuani. We were talking before, kind of the confusion between the two beams. In this case, both are good, so you can just interchange them and no one will notice because both are going to be used to try and kill off Gangplank, Sejuani, or even the Dreadway, the 8-mana card we see now in hand for Yamato.
Yeah. Some Fumes feels a little bit usable if... again, we know that you have the Thermogenic Beam to answer Gangplank on 5 or Sejuani on 6. As long as you're floating 1 spell mana, you're pretty much always okay. Even if they're leveled up. But yeah, in this case, says, you know what? Let's go be mana efficient. Let's knock them the 2-2.
Not just that, but also get the ticks onto the Tri-Beam as well. And
right, and that's the big one, is ramping Tri-Beam. Because it's just something to do, even though you don't super care. I think there was, by the way, like a choice between killing a 2-2 and something that's going to discount all your nabs, since you are going to see 3 Yordle Grifters in this list. There is a choice to be made there. But seeing that the round 4 play was card draw and not Grifter says you don't have Grifter.
And it feels so bad not having a Lost Soul here to activate the Poros and to get some chump blockers on the board, to get some more of a presence in this mid game before kind of the big threats come in the late game from either player. It really does feel like the hand is just awkward. You have the Sentry, but not the Flock. You have the Poros, but not the Lost Souls. You don't have kind of the combo synergies that you want to have with the deck that Szychu's playing here.
I think that's why he's thinking so long. He knows the beginning of the next round is, okay, I'm just going to discard Farron now. That's the one and only Farron. Wants units on the board.
He feels so bad doing it. Look at his face. Look at his reaction is he knows that, this is not ideal. Far from it, I think. And the Scorched Earth being taken from the nab is something that, it's one of these cards that really has a very strong effect in the right situation. So it's a pretty big steal for Yamato. One turn too late.
At least you can nuke Gangplank, but you are taking face damage this round if you do it. You don't have enough units to block everything.
And you don't have the Thermo Beam at the perfect 5. You have it at 8 now, so it creates this awkward situation where you're going to spend a little bit more mana than you want to. I think the Tri-Beam is not yet at 5, so it's not going to be quite enough to cleanly deal with a Gangplank.
2?
We did see House Fighters played.
Yeah, we saw some fumes. We saw some fumes, and that was it,
little else, I think. Yeah, definitely not to 5. It's
we
2 or 3
some
maximum.
Poros in. Yeah,
we might not count perfectly, but we count well enough that we know the general
we're
space it can
4.
be in. Exactly.
Yeah, all right, there we go. We got that.
All right, good job,
2. Yeah, this would be bad. You could Tri-Beam, then get excited the Gangplank. I'm not saying it's the right call. I'm just saying it is an available play if you don't want a Thermo for 8.
Mm-hmm.
If you play the Poro, it's going to be too late. I'm actually a little surprised you didn't Poro in the previous round. Okay, this stun is actually not bad either. This is a pretty good one. Obviously, Gangplank level 1, all he does is swing, so slowing this down is not too deadly.
And of course, you maybe want to save this for when Sejuani comes down. You want to save this, but even with Gangplank not leveled up, him swinging in, dealing some overwhelm damage, as long as he gets damage and you have a way to kill him or to clean him up, that's also fine. In this case, you're just stunning, you're stalling it out, you're not killing him outright, so it's still a problem. You still have to deal with this in the next few turns, and you're kind of, I guess this is the way to do it. You develop, you get a blocker on board, and now you clean it up with Thermo. So you end up killing the Gangplank. We mentioned the kind of wasting that 3 mana, and the way that Szychu has done it now, he's done it perfectly. He didn't waste that mana at all.
Easy to pass your life. You don't like any development. Your opponent wastes 3 more mana than you. You're just trying to wait to get to another discard synergy. Like, you can get excited, obviously. Says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and tank my own unit. I'm going to get rid of my barrels. Doesn't have any synergy with it anyway. The Harpoon's going to kill anything in the deck regardless, so barrels are pretty useless for the current spell suite, and says, now we're still passing.
This makes it awkward now because Yamato would want to play Sejuani this turn, would want to target something and drag it and kill it while it has 0 attack. But because nothing was played by Szychu, now Yamato has to decide, do I open attack? If I do, then I can't play Sejuani on this attack token. I have to wait 2 more turns to get the full effect from her if that's what I want to do. And you can't really make a priority pass here because if you play out the Merchant, you don't have mana for Sejuani. So actually a pretty heads-up play from Szychu. Playing so reactively is great going into these turns.
And he goes through his entire idea of options. Says, okay, knew he didn't have Lost Soul earlier because of what got discarded a while ago. Finally found the synergy, though. Comes down with a couple of nice units. This could actually be a real board here. Yeah, this feels like a Merchant and maybe a Harpoon as far as just playing out your hand. A Traveler's not bad either.
You
want to play it before...
Pickup here. It hits the Tri-Beam that you've been working so hard to pump up, and all of that work is gone. Szychu knows he is... I don't want to say a bad word here, but he is in big trouble. He's 1-0 down in the series already, and this is not going his way at all.
And think about what Yamato knows. He's like, this was the second most card, like the second leftmost card in your hand, and it was like a Tri-Beam for 4. Like, unless that get excited as other Tri-Beam, your Tri-Beams are small in this deck right now.
And Freak, you're playing Lost Souls in this deck. What are the chances that these aloofs, it gets stolen from you, and you also, get one of your possible win conditions discarded as well? And this goes back to the Farron being discarded by the Poros because you didn't have Lost Soul in hand. So Lost Soul, usually the savior of this deck, and the one reason that this deck is so powerful in these grindy matchups. In this case, screwing everything up, not coming into hand at the right time, and now it's going to be Revenant on the board. Sure, you're going to get the Lost Soul back, but it wasn't there when you needed it most.
At least it's an okay attack. You've got a quick attack to put down. You've got a stunner to put down if you want to put in a lot of pressure. I mean, this Poro in hand is already known, so you're not, bleeding info out here. You could, can you get your opponent down to 6, though, in any reasonable time for the double good excited? The answer looks to be no. Dreadway blocks almost any good attacks now.
You have to kill this off. You have to use Get Excited
Get Excited
here. And control 1, and if his hand was looking like what Realkey's hand looked like in the quarterfinals, where it was just out of fuel with TF Swain, great, but that's not the case here for Yamato. He has the Gangplank, he has a Sejuani, he has the second Dreadway as well, and the Harpoon to control whatever kind of threat Szychu tries to develop. The Farron was discarded, so we don't. That's not an option either. It's only really going to be Ezreal to push through a lot of damage, and Yamato's still at 18 HP. I mean, what amount of burn damage with Ezreal are you going to try and push through with a Harpoon in hand for Yamato that can make this game anywhere close at all?
He's not willing to get excited to keep his Caitlyn safe, and he's not willing to trade the 4-3 in. So, okay, we're going to warning shot. We're going to go ahead and get a cheap Harpoon. We're going to keep Dreadway alive. Deals 10 to a unit. Sure. Oh, man, this is looking bad fast. I think we're at or one shy of leveling here.
And
the champions.
The information game as well with the Aloofs and the Nab is also so big for Yamato. He knows one Scorched Earth was stolen already. He stole it with the Nab earlier in the game with the Merchant. And there's only 2 in the deck, and the Scorched Earth is really the biggest thing that's going to directly deal, I guess Ravenous Flock as well in this case, to deal with these big units.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to be in the same spot as you. It's like, yeah, like, where's the Flock? He's got 3 of them. He's finally got the setup to stop at Dreadway. Where is it? And finally gets it. He's at least got stunned, so everything that gets summoned here, right? Gangplank comes down, stunned. Sejuani comes down, now straight to jail, stunned. Like, you know, you keep it going for a little bit. This is probably not you dying this round. There's barely any face damage. It's going to look, you know, you can nab and grab yourself a warning shot, but you're not killing him just yet.
That's a perfect pass there from Szychu. Obviously, the Crackshot Corsair development was a clear priority pass from Yamato, just trying to not give away information, try and make a smaller play. That's still going to be very impactful with Sejuani because of the ping effect. And I think it probably will be the Crackshot Corsair leveling up the Sejuani. And then the overwhelm damage with Sejuani, frostbiting the entire board here and not allowing any single trade. This is why Crackshot Corsair is such a cracked unit in this Plunder archetype. It comes out on turn 1, extremely effective. It comes out on turn 9, extremely effective. And it's a 1-drop.
Yeah, so there's a stun. It sets up for Flock and Excited if you want, but you're pretty much out of cards if you do it that way. I'm trying to think if there's a reason to go for Yordle Grifter. Actually, no, you have no mana, so no. But you can look to kill a couple units off. Send the small ones, because, yeah, you've got reinforcements to play. You want room for the Gangplank Barrel. You want room for the Yordle Grifter. You wouldn't even mind a second Dreadway coming down at some point, so, you know, go ahead and take the trade sometimes. It's going to be hard to get value out of Scorched Earth, so there's even, like, a reason to have a 2-2 just die to a 4-3. But I don't know if you want to trade both of them out. That feels kind of bad.
I think it's a difficult decision. Yeah, I think maybe one is correct, because you know that this Dreadway is going to be dealt with. I think with the play with the Twinblade Revenant challenging it last turn, it already showed that Szychu was trying to damage it to then deal with it with a Flock or a Scorched Earth to get excited. So you know that board space will open up, and then we see it the Flock onto the Dreadway. And Yamato, I think he's counting on this. He knows that he wants to, like you said, doesn't want to throw away his units, but he knows that any trade that's happening here, if he waits one more turn with Sejuani frostbiting everything, then it's going to be a free trade. But I think, like you mentioned, it's worth opening up a little bit more space on the board.
Yeah, gets rid of the less useful unit. Knows he can nab one more card. Wants to discount it. You never know what it's going to be worth. You know, why not get those unnerfed Tri-Beams, you know, back in the hand? You know, get one of those. Feel good about it. So, room for Gangplank and a barrel if that's the line of play. Archivist is some decent card generation.
And you're getting the attempt at the kill here on Sejuani. Any amount of damage is going to be very relevant because it enables things like Flock, things like Scorched Earth, and even Fear of the North won't obviously stop something like a Scorched Earth. There is one copy still left in the deck after one was stolen by Yamato with one of the merchants earlier on. That being said, Szychu is now thinking, is there any way that I can get Plunder this turn and make
3 warning shots, 3 Make It Rains.
That makes this entire attack useless?
3 warning shots, 3 Make It Rains are in the deck. We know they don't have them. Yamato doesn't have those. I think 2 main deck warning shots were played. I don't believe I saw a Make It Rain yet, but hey, by the way, there's what I stole from you. 2 mana Scorched Earth. It's amazing that was the one he chose to block with. Because, like, how would you play around Scorched Earth being the steal? Or, I mean, maybe Make It Rain and getting lucky, but, you know, chose to block with it earlier. Yeah.
Comes down, leveled up. The threats continue stacking here on Yamato's side. Szychu is doing his absolute best to deal with them one by one, but it's just too much, too late. And there's not really, the Tri-Beam here from Archivist doesn't do anything. It's fleeting and at 1. The Rummage, you can discard the Lost Soul and activate it again and try and find something. But again, just everything seems to not go Szychu's way in this game.
I think you take Tri-Beam, play a Spider, and then nuke something. Like, I mean, what are you getting out of rummaging? I guess you could rummage a Poro and the Lost Soul. Like, that's actually not horrible.
Yeah, it activates the Twin Blade again, and it gives you, I mean,
Yeah.
trying to draw into something, but like we mentioned before, with a Farron gone as kind of that explosive top deck in the late game, what are you really drawing that's going to do something as a top deck? Tri-beam is not the case because of the fact that obviously comes down at one, you have to ramp it up slowly throughout the game, and all that hard work that Szychu was doing to ramp up one of them was discarded by the Aloof Travelers that was stolen by Yamato.
Well, there's the Tri-beam you saw, and you can get excited to pop the other one and get, another 3-mana trigger down, but I feel like, we're looking at putting a challenger down, grabbing Gangplank or Sejuani and nuking them. Of course, we know Fury of the North exists.
It's one of the scariest boards to look at in the game. I mean, we talked about Fuel the Rush, but Sejuani leveled up it just locks you out of games completely. It's one of the strongest level up effects in the game when the deck is built around this, and when you have things like Warning Shot. We have the Yordle Grifter that can be played right now. If you want to, you can overwrite one of these units and just have that Warning Shot available at any point in time. But first, you're going to see if she tries to commit something to remove one of these units first and not have to make you overwrite that value on the board.
The longer you wait, the more you think they have Fury of the North, right? Do they have another copy of Sejuani? Did they find Three Sisters? Where we have enough mana for Three Sisters Fury of the North as well, so you're not even sure that Get Excited will get you the rest of the way over. So you can't even say, well, I'll drag your Gangplank and then nuke it, and it's like, you just got rid of a blocker, bro. Like, it's just worse than last time, and this is looking almost locked up. I think the open attack is going to be near lethal.
Szychu's setting up the possible Scorched Earth top deck just to make sure he can do it, the moment
He's
he
got
top
none
deck if
left,
there is
right?
an open attack. He does have one left.
Didn't he already use one? I thought he used one and the other one got stolen, or am I wrong?
I believe it was a flock that he used to kill off the
Okay.
Dreadway.
Yeah.
And there should still be one in the hand for
This is so
Yamato.
smart! This plays around Scorched Earth top deck!
This is
the
so
preemptive
good.
buff is so smart!
And there's a Warning Shot top deck. You don't even need your old Grifter. Yamato with the big brain plays. If you do that on the same turn, it doesn't heal, but because the turn passes over and the game checks for the health on the Gangplank, it goes back to the unhealed 6 HP. What can Szychu do against this board? What can he do against his attack? Both leveled up champions for Yamato. Give him the win with Plunder, the 2-0 sweep in this semifinals. He advances to the finals to face Alan, ZQ, Japan versus Poland in the first ever Legends of Runeterra World Championship.
I love this. I am stoked to see those players face off in the finals because they both brought their own spice in the decks. Neither Alan nor Yamato came with bog standard lineups. Szychu the same, also brought some uniqueness. Sad for him, he couldn't pull it through on his most normal deck of Caitlyn, Ezreal, Draven. So, kind of funny to see it that way, but it does mean that the players who innovated and brought their own unique spice, that tended to be rewarded. In the case that's not, Swain TF, just ignore that one from Real Key, but for everyone else, it looked really good.
And in this semis for the viewers as well, the dongers have deflated because the Zoe Heimer was not banned, but it wasn't even played because Szychu went with this same deck in both games and he got swept 2-0. So I think for a lot of people, I mean, Europeans, Polish players, but also just for the viewers that wanted to see more Heimerdinger, a bit disappointing. But for players that have been watching Yamato play throughout this entire tournament, I think you have to be happy to see a player that has, I think, the cleanest play out of everyone rewarded and in the finals.
Oh, that grand finals is going to be so exciting. I cannot wait to see those incredible deck lineups go head to head. But let's take a look at the bracket and just show everybody where we're at right now, knowing that we have our top four. And we also know who's going to be playing in the grand finals and also who is playing for that third place match. This is so cool.
We can see more Heimer because there is a third place match. So if you wanted to see Szychu play again, he is still going to play again. And you hope Heimer's not banned. I'm just always a fan of players bringing unique decks, not just the top four of the meta. I will bring the meta. I will just play whatever's, vaguely strong. But love when players innovate. They find a cool lineup. And hey, for Alan, Yamato, what they brought looked great.
Freak, the moment you mentioned that, I think you jinxed it because one of mine had the same lineup as Majin Bay, and Majin Bay banned Zoe Heimer, so that might not actually happen, but we, the dongers in chat have hope that will be at least the last chance for Szychu to show us the power of Heimerdinger in this current tournament.
Oh, I hope so. But thank you so much for bringing us through that last semifinal. Panda, we'll see you in a little bit. But Freak, I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of the World Championship broadcast. I hope you had a lot of fun.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I got to cast like 3 of the 4 darkness wins. Like, it was great. I got to have a lot of fun, even though I kept getting Vigor's level up backwards with Senna's. It was a lot of fun watching unique decks get wins.
All right, everybody. Well, we're going to be taking a short break. When we come back, our third place match.